Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and I think it is time for an Outlaw Rogue PvE guide. This Outlaw Rogue PvE guide is going to be primarily focused on the raiding scene and raiding environment in the brand new raid of the Eternal Palace. The spec itself is in an awesome spot, and as someone who's been playing the spec since Legion, I feel like we are in an even better spot than we were in the last raid. The spec simply just keeps getting better and better and better, particularly with more gear. In this video, we'll cover everything about Outlaw, from the stats, talents, best Azure traits to look out for, the new essences and which ones are going to be the best for the spec. You also have trinkets, we'll talk about the rotation, cooldown management, and more. So when it comes to the stats from Outlaw, what I found out is these are my stats that generally the sims recommend me, and this has been my stats from the experience of playing Outlaw since the beginning of Battle for Azeroth. What I found out is the game generally likes for you to have between 11% and 40% haste. If you do get a bunch of pieces of gear that are on upgrade in terms of agility, but they have a lot of haste, 40% will be your cap. But generally you want to have haste as less as possible. Now, you can go for like a 40% if you want for a more smoother gameplay, if you feel like you're getting energy starved, but generally the less you commit into haste and the more you commit into other stats like critical strike and versatility, the more damage you'll put up as Outlaw. For your crit and versatility, usually they are fairly equal. There's moments where critical strike is a little stronger depending on your Azerite essences and on your Azerite traits. Versatility can sometimes overtake depending on what type of content you're doing as well. Generally, it's a good idea to sim, but if you don't want to sim, then treat critical strike and versatility as equals after you have gotten between 11 to 40% of haste. Mastery should generally be avoided in gear. Mastery used to be good way back in the day when we could control the percentage at which was the percent of us to get a secondary hit. That's what Mastery used to increase, but now Mastery simply increases the damage of that secondary hit, and that secondary hit from our Mastery has a flat 30% chance to proc. That means it's really RNG whether it does proc or not, so that's why we don't want to invest our points too much into Mastery. When you're first starting out as an Outlaw Rogue, let's say you're just starting to gear your character, agility is going to be a far superior stat for you. So even if a piece of gear, let's say, is like a 15 to 10 item level upgrade, but it has mastery, then it's better to take the agility at first. But once you start to get between that 400 to 410, 420 and higher item levels, then you're going to want to look for secondary stats like critical strike and versatility over mastery. Unless the piece of gear is like a 30 item level upgrade, then the agility is going to outweigh it. If you're not sure exactly what your character's stats are, you can always head over to RaidBots, which is a beautiful website. You can go to stat weights and literally plug in your character with your region. So for example, Illidan for me, and character name would be Dalaran XP. And while you can get the add-on Simcraft in order to plug in every detail of your character, you could also just plug in here your character name, server, and region, and it'll spit out your character currently where you're there at. And I'm just going to change this to a single target and generate stat weights. Now when it comes to Outlaw Rogue talents for PvE, we're going to have some options, but for the most part they're pretty straightforward. In the first row, Quick Draw is going to be absolutely the best choice, no matter whether you do an AoE, player versus player, even PvE content. So Quick Draw is going to be always the talent of choice. At level 30, it really could be up to you, but I generally recommend in PvE content Acrobatic Strikes. Having 3 extra yards on your melee does give you a little bit of flexibility and doesn't really force you to be right against the boss DPSing him down. So if, let's say, mechanics like Fire Strike, you can get around them while still being able to do damage to the boss. Plus, in Freehold for the Shark boss, this is a must-have talent. At level 45, it really is going to come down to Vigor and Deeper Strat, depending on what Azure traits you're running. It's always a good idea to sim. Mark for Death has some use in AoE because of the cooldown reduction mechanic that Outlaw possesses, but if you're not sure, then Vigor is going to be a solid choice. At level 60, it doesn't really matter which talent you run, but I like Cheat Death, because if you do encounter mechanics like a new raid fight or a dungeon fight that you're not familiar with, Cheat Death can definitely save you and allow you to keep playing the game, even if you make a mistake. Level 75, It doesn't really matter which one you run. I prefer Prey in the Weak in general, especially if I'm doing Mythic Plus dungeons, because stunning enemies with between the eyes is pretty much part of your rotation as Outlaw Rogue. At level 90, we have two options, Alacrity and Loaded Dice. Loaded Dice is good in very particular build, so if you're not running a particular build, which I'll probably make a video about in a future time, you probably should be sticking with Alacrity. The amount of haste you get with it is very solid, and Slice and I simply cannot compete with Roll the Bones, so most of you guys should roll Alacrity. At level 100, it all depends on the situation. If you're pure single target, Blade Rush is going to be your option. If you have some single target / cleave, Blade Rush is a decent choice. If you have enemies that come in that have very low health that must be bursted down, then Kill Spree is going to be your choice. But besides that, Kill Spree and Blade Rush are very close to each other, so it could be all about preference. If you're doing something pure AoE, Mythic Plus dungeons, or simply don't want to have an extra button on your screen, then Dance of Steel is a decent option in case any cleave AoE comes up, but most of you guys should be rolling Blade Rush. When it comes to Asura Traits, some of the best Asura Traits that are stackable for Outlaw are going to be Deadshot, where on you between the eyes, your next pistol shot will do more damage. You'll usually combine this after Deadshot with a proc pistol shot to get some real value. Another great one that's worth stacking or picking up on your Outlaw is going to be Ace Up Your Sleeve, which will increase the damage output of you between the eyes, also stackable and still very potent for Outlaw. Finally, I will recommend all of you guys to have at least one Keep Your Wits About You. Even in pure single target fights with any kind of cleave at all, Keep Your Wits About You ends up being an immeasurable Azure trait that's still decent even in single target. This will allow you plenty of gear and plenty of capability to tackle single target as well as cleave based content. However, if you are not sure which Azure traits are going to be the best, you can also use Raidbot's website with the add-on from Simcraft, again found in the description below, to try all the different traits and try to see which ones ends up doing the most damage for you. Depending whether you pay for the service or not, you will still be able to compare and contrast different traits against one another, which is a very useful tool if you simply just want the website to calculate the best possible combination for single target, cleave, maybe even dungeon experience, and spit you out the best information so you don't really have to process it by yourself. So one of the highlights for patch 8.2 in particular is the brand new Essence system. Essences are going to be passives and active abilities that can be earned for your necklace Heart of Azeroth. In this part of the video, let's just talk about which essences are the best, and we will be referring a website Hero Damage for majority of that list. Now on Hero Damage, we can see a lot of these essences and what is strong for them, and which ones we'll want to aim for. Off the top, we can already see Condensed Life Force. This essence is going to be extra powerful at rank 3, and even a rank 1 of this essence for Outlaw Rogue is incredible. The second best essence for single target is going to be Crucible Flames, a very easy and simple essence to play with, and I have that one currently at rank 2. Right now, my Condensed Life is only at rank 1, so rank 2 is going to outrank that. So this is the only two essences you're going to want to look out for your Outlaw. Outside of that, if you have Crucible Flame at rank 1, you also have Memory of Lucid, Vision of Perfection, Blood of the Enemy, as well as Essence of Focusing Iris, which is generally good in AoE situations. Now, you could also sim your character for which essences you want to run, as Raidbots does support essences as well, so you can make a couple different builds. And I'll be making a video on separate builds, particularly one with the Vision of Perfection that I want for you guys to check out, but that will probably be in another video. When it comes to trinkets, Outlaw has a couple options, and most of them will be found inside of the brand new raid. Ashvane's Razor Coral is going to be the best choice right now, that's simming the highest. Dribbling Inkpot is going to be right behind it. Kimball's Razor Claw from BOD is still a very potent choice, and the dungeons offer you a couple options for single target, like the Kulturan Cannibal Runner and Tiny Electromental in the Jar. Also, the brand new trinket called the Highborn Compendium of Sundering is especially powerful, and this one can actually be bought on the auction house. If you're a new rogue, be sure to pick up this trinket ASAP because it is very, very powerful right now. This trinket is going to be one of those trinkets that's going to be a starter trinket, so you'll eventually want to replace it. But with how inexpensive it is, at least on my server of Illidan on the auction house, this is definitely going to be a pretty hefty power spike for a lot of rogues just getting some decent gear. And this is something that can be bought or made if you're someone who likes doing professions, and trust me, this one is definitely going to help you give that edge. When it comes to the rotation for an Outlaw rogue, it is all fairly simple, but there are definitely certain rules that you have to follow. The rotation doesn't really have some sort of a predictability, as in press ability 1, ability 3, ability 2, ability 4, repeat. But rather you have common point builders and common point spenders. You build common points and then you spend them depending on what buffs you have, what setups you have, and what abilities are off cooldown. So this is the general association for Outlaw rogue in your rotation. So when you're at 5 or 4 common points, you want to use Roll the Bones. And we'll talk about which buffs you keep, which buffs you re-roll out of for Outlaw. So keep re-rolling until you have specific buffs. We'll talk about that in a second in the video. When you don't need to re-roll for Roll the Bones, you want to be using Between the Eyes if you're running Deadshot or Ace Up Your Sleeve as a trait, or you have Ruthless Precision as a buff. If you don't need to use Between the Eyes, then spend those common points on Dispatch. All of those abilities should be used at 5 common points, unless you have a proc called Opportunity, which makes your Deadshot do more damage and cost half the energy. If Opportunity is up and you have 4 common points, it's best to use those common points into a finisher. Use Pistol Shot, but only on the Opportunity procs. Unless for some reason you're far away from an enemy and you can't reach him in melee range and you're about to overcap on energy, then you may want a Pistol Shot, but in most cases you won't really need to. Do not use Pistol Shot if you're going to overdrawn common points, as in if you're sitting at 4 common points and you have Opportunity, it's best to use the finisher, then use Pistol Shot. You want to maximize the use of your common points and you don't want to overmake them, you want to maybe undercut them by 1 at most. Outside of that, use Sinister Strike to generate combo points. Now let's talk about the buff mechanic. With the buffs for Roll the Bones, these are the buffs you want to keep, and these are the buffs you want to reroll. If you get yourself Ruthless Precision, or Grand Melee, or any 2 buff combo, or a 5 buff combo, these buffs you keep. Any other buff you want to reroll out of. If one of the buffs you end up getting as Outlaw is gonna be Broadsides, with Broadsides you generate an extra common point on all your common point generating abilities. With this buff, do try to undercut your finishers at 4 common points, since you'll be generating so many common points anyway and you do not want to overdraw on them. One of the biggest things about Outlaw is the buff mechanic. Memorizing the icons for every single buff and what each one of them does is going to be very, very important. So better start learning how the buff mechanic works early in order to figure out how to play your Outlaw rogue. When it comes to Outlaw rogues and cooldowns, a lot of people ask me when is the best time to use Adrenaline Rush. Now, Adrenaline Rush and things like Killing Spree should for the most part be used on cooldown, unless you can save them to be able to cleave a bunch of enemies, but sometimes saving them for a little too long does mean you are simply losing out on a lot of damage. So on the most part, Adrenaline Rush as an ability should be used basically on cooldown. It's also a good idea to watch out for, let's say you're doing a dungeon or a raid, if there is going to be more enemies joining the fight. So abilities like Blade Flurry for cleave are also going to be very important when you can use them to utilize the most amount of damage in the shortest window possible. And you want to combine as many cooldowns together in order to maximize the value of the abilities that you'll be able to put out. Besides that, Outlaw rogue is not too strict on the cooldown usage and cooldown management, so for the most part, even a novice Outlaw rogue should be able to play the spec fairly well without messing up your cooldowns too heavily, so don't worry too much about that. If you are making a brand new Outlaw rogue, here are some of the best ratios to help out the specs. First of all, on the Alliance, the Dwarf is going to be extra powerful for the extra crit damage, and as Outlaws you crit quite a bit. Then Culturan is going to be great for the versatility that it offers. Then you're going to have Void Elves, which provide a 5% damage buff, which lines up fairly well with the consistency of the damage output of your rogue. Pandaren are also a decent choice if you do choose to play Alliance. And finally, Night Elf is going to be your top tier picks, but technically you can play whatever you want when it comes to your Outlaw rogue. Same for the Horde. If you do want to maximize your Outlaw rogue efficiency with racials, you'll want to first take a look at the Undead. They make great Outlaw rogues with their passive and with how damage scales. Blood Elves are also great because of the extra crit with how many of your abilities are going to be critting, followed by Pandaren making a solid choice for Pandaren Outlaw rogues with the extra foot buff. Zandalari make a great Outlaw rogue as well with different buffs from different loa that they can offer, as well as Goblin make a solid Outlaw rogue for the 1% extra haste that they get as a stat. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys found this video enjoyable and informative in terms of playing your Outlaw rogue in this patch of 8.2. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hopefully I'm giving you guys all the information needed, whether you want to just pick up your Outlaw and play him casually, or even maybe level a brand new one, best in slot, top tier spec, and even choose the best racials for it. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I'll be doing a lot more guides on Outlaw, rogues in general as well, hidden with Assassination subtlety for both PvE as well as PvP content. So if you guys want to see more guides on rogues in general for patch 8.2, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give this video a like. Likes allow my videos to grow a wider audience, and that can always help my channel grow. If you guys got any questions and you want to ask me directly, I do have a link down in the description below for the channel Discord. You guys are more than welcome to join it, and feel free to DM me or simply tag me in the post asking me any questions you desire, and I'll most likely be there to answer all of you guys' questions. Thank you guys so much for watching again. I appreciate all of you, and I'll see a lot of you guys in another video.